case of Chauhan family. Amarjit Chauhan was the owner of Chiba Freight, a thriving fruit import business near Heathrow Airport. To those around him, Amarjit appeared to be a devoted family man and a kind employer, loved by his staff, and sharing a happy life with his wife and 2 young children. Amarjit viewed his employees as a part of his family. To show his appreciation to them during the busy time of the company, he would often treat them to pizza and drinks. He also maintained a calm and approachable leadership style, which earned him great respect from everyone. Amarjit's employees were concerned about the company's future if he were to move to India, a recurring subject in conversations with his wife, Nancy. She hoped that Amarjit, who was 46, would soon be able to retire, allowing them to spend more time with their children. Nancy often told her husband about her desire to return to India. As time went by, Amarjit began to consider Nancy's wish and started thinking about selling their business to move back to their hometown. The plan might have worked if Amarjit Chauhan's ownership of Chiba Freight had not run into trouble. However, someone had his eye on Amarjit's company and was looking to take control of it without investing any money. In January 2003, Kenneth Reagan, who had just been released from prison, looked for a job at Chiba Freight. Amarjit, the company's owner, who had also had his own run-ins with the law due to tax evasion, could relate to Kenneth's struggles. Knowing how hard it could be for people to find work after being out of prison, Amarjit was willing to give Kenneth a chance, which was consistent with his reputation for being understanding and easygoing. Amarjit decided to offer Kenneth a second chance by hiring him as a driver. Kenneth turned out to be a diligent worker, unafraid to tackle any task, and performed his duties excellently. Kenneth was more than just a driver. In the past, he was an expert smuggler nicknamed Captain Cash. By the late 1990s, Kenneth had built up a reputation as a veteran criminal running various freight companies, which served as fronts to hide his real business: smuggling illegal drugs into the UK. He had risen to prominence in London's underworld and mingled with influential figures in the criminal world. Despite his modest demeanor, Kenneth led a life of luxury, perceiving himself as a wealthy socialite and a renowned figure in the global underworld. In 1997, at the peak of his illicit activities, Kenneth met Belinda Bruin, a socialite, at an upscale London bar. He flaunted his wealth, driving a Mercedes and showering her with expensive gifts. She saw him as sophisticated and charming, albeit a bit rough around the edges, a man who impeccably showed off his luxury watches and wasn't afraid to display his wealth. Often seen carrying a briefcase full of cash, Kenneth believed this extravagant lifestyle would boost his social standing. Unbeknownst to her, Belinda Bruin was drawn into Kenneth's world of crime and deception. Kenneth became intensely infatuated with Belinda. He called and emailed her constantly, professing his feelings, as if he were a lovesick teenager. Even though they only had a superficial acquaintance, Kenneth told others that Belinda was his girlfriend, leaving Belinda confused. Kenneth was arrested on June 17, 1998, in possession of 25 kilograms of a white substance, which put him at risk of receiving a prison sentence of up to 18 years. However, Kenneth chose to cooperate with the authorities, and his testimony helped convict 12 major criminals. As a result, his own sentence was significantly reduced. Years later, after Kenneth was released from prison, he found himself with nothing. No friends, no money, and his assets had been seized. When faced with these hardships, he moved into a small house with his father, determined to find a way to regain his lost wealth and status. Kenneth, looking to get back into the illicit drug trade, targeted Amarjit Chauhan's company Chiba Freight as the perfect stepping stone for his return. He carefully devised a plan to take control of the company, carrying it out so meticulously that no one suspected anything. Once inside the company, Kenneth learned from co-workers that Amarjit was considering selling Chiba Freight to move abroad. Seizing the opportunity, Kenneth approached Amarjit with a fake story, offering a deal worth $4 million to grab his attention. While Amarjit thought over the proposal, Kenneth continued with his plan, seeking to use Chiba Freight for more than just business. Meanwhile, Kenneth also set his sights on Belinda, who had moved to Devon to escape him during his time in prison. He reached out to her again with a business proposal, knowing she was struggling financially. After her husband left, she was shouldering the responsibilities alone, finding it increasingly difficult to afford her house, the mortgage, and the high costs of sending her children to a private school. When she responded, Kenneth told her about his plan to take over Chiba Freight and suggested she join the company as a director. Despite lacking experience, he offered her a salary of $54,000 for working only 2 days a week, amounting to $68,000 per year. Belinda took advantage of the opportunity and negotiated a higher salary of $72,000, nearly $9,000 more, which Kenneth agreed to without hesitation. Kenneth visited Belinda at her rural home in Devon under the guise of discussing a job. To justify these visits, he made up reasons, such as needing her signature on a document or help with paperwork. However, Kenneth's real interest lay in the land surrounding Belinda's home, an interest that soon became clear. He began to express concerns to Belinda about the condition of the path leading to the house, suggesting various improvements. These included removing certain trees, building a wall with electric gates, and installing a drainage system. At first, it seemed Kenneth was motivated by a desire to beautify the property for Belinda's benefit. But this might not have been his true intention. In February, Amarjeet made a critical decision regarding the future of his company. He chose to engage with buyers to discuss a possible sale. Before leaving, Amarjeet informed his employees that he would be visiting Stonehenge, but gave no further details. Additionally, he promised to keep them personally updated on the progress of the company's sale. Unfortunately, this meeting would be the last time his employees saw him, and his unexplained disappearance soon became a matter of concern. On a Monday morning, the staff of Chiba Freight gathered together, only to be met with a shocking announcement. Kenneth unexpectedly introduced Belinda as the new owner of the company, catching everyone off guard and raising many questions. The employees were left wondering what had happened to Amarjeet, why he hadn't said goodbye, and what the future held for the company. Then, Kenneth presented a letter that he claimed was from Amarjeet. According to the letter, Amarjeet had decided to sell the company due to poor health and was relocating abroad with his family. Notably, the staff confirmed that the signature on the letter belonged to Amarjeet. The company's success and surge in orders left the team too busy to worry about what the future held. As a result, they stopped discussing their concerns and focused on their work. Belinda was given a desk and computer in the office and started studying the company's finances as instructed by Kenneth. However, she felt unwell on her second day and decided to leave for her home in Devon without waiting for Kenneth's approval. When she arrived, she was shocked to see an old, run-down Jaguar parked by the road and two men, William Hornsey and Peter Rees, who were associated with Kenneth, digging a drainage ditch on her property. This unexpected discovery made her extremely uncomfortable. Belinda confronted Kenneth as soon as he arrived at her property, expressing her frustration and anger over the unauthorized excavation work he had done. She told him she didn't need a drainage ditch, but Kenneth claimed that he did it just to surprise her and assured her everything would be sorted out by summer. However, their plans were put on hold when the Metropolitan Police started a new investigation into the situation. In 2003, Kenneth, who had previously been convicted for drug trafficking, was rebuilding his luxurious life. After Amarjeet, the former owner of the Chiba Freight, disappeared, Kenneth took over the company, using it as a cover for his smuggling operation. For 5 years, Kenneth had secretly admired Belinda, and now that she was involved in his operation, it seemed like all his dreams were coming true. But the foundation of his empire was about to be exposed. Ankur Varma, a journalist based in New Zealand, was eagerly awaiting a reunion with his 25-year-old sister, Nancy, who lived in London with her husband, Amarjeet Chauhan, and their 2 young children. This visit was especially significant, as Ankur and Nancy hadn't seen each other in 9 years. Ankur would frequently talk to Nancy and their mother to discuss activities and plan his upcoming visit. However, on February 15, 2003, Ankur attempted to contact Nancy and his mother, but neither of them responded. Initially, he thought they might be on a trip, but as the days passed without any response, Ankur grew increasingly concerned. This was unusual because they had not mentioned any travel plans to him, and his visit was just 5 days away. Concerned for his family's safety, Ankur contacted the Metropolitan Police for help. When police from Scotland Yard visited the family's residence, they found it empty. Neighbors and colleagues speculated that the family might have returned to their home country, India. However, further updates from police at Scotland Yard increased Ankur's anxiety for his sister, mother, and nephews. His concern turned into fear, prompting him to decide on traveling to the UK to personally investigate the disappearance of his family. Upon arrival in London, Ankur felt isolated in an unfamiliar city. He went to the Chauhan household in Hounslow, expecting a warm welcome. Instead, he was shocked by a sight that left him in utter disbelief. At first glance, the home looked normal, as if the family had just stepped out for a moment. But the reality was very different. Closer inspection revealed that the family had been gone for weeks. The laundry was still in the washer. Children's toys and baby bottles with leftover food were scattered across the floor and kitchen counter, and food had spoiled. It looked like someone had been interrupted in the middle of washing dishes. While clothes and suitcases were neatly stored away, personal belongings were scattered throughout the three-bedroom house. The refrigerator still had food. But what devastated Encore the most was finding his mother's cherished prayer book, a possession she always kept close and never left behind. Encore was confused and worried about his sister's family, who had 2 young children, disappearing without a trace. It seemed unlikely that they had left their home by choice. Encore convinced the authorities to launch an investigation. A team of experienced detectives from the Serious Crime Division took over the case. As time passed, Encore lost hope of ever being reunited with his family and that their future plans would no longer be fulfilled. A massive search was launched to find the family of Amarjit Chauhan. The lead detective decided to question the person who last saw Amarjit on the day he disappeared. Kenneth, a former prisoner with suspicious behavior, was the primary suspect. Kenneth tried to convince the police that Amarjit was not a trustworthy man, and his financial troubles led him to run away on his own. Kenneth also told the police that Amarjit likely wanted to get rid of his business and was probably in another country by then. However, the investigators did not believe Kenneth's explanation. They used advanced forensic techniques to track the movement of Kenneth and Amarjit's cell phones on the day Amarjit disappeared. The investigation first located Amarjit's phone at his home, which then moved on to Stonehenge where a business meeting was scheduled. It was at Stonehenge that Kenneth's phone connected with Amarjit's. And after that, both phones were tracked moving towards Devon. The detective's only lead was that Belinda Bruin, the new head of Chiba Freight, lived in Devon, so they decided to pay her a visit. However, when the police talked about plans to search Belinda's piece of land, her partner, Kenneth, intervened. He was furious and tried to convince her not to allow the search, suggesting they meet somewhere else instead. Belinda refused to budge. Meanwhile, Kenneth's aide, William Hornsey, got in touch with the chief detective and claimed he had recently spoken with Amarjit. He said that Amarjit was apparently still in Britain. The authorities agreed to meet in Newport, Wales, near the passport agency, hoping to use this opportunity to uncover the truth behind Amarjit's disappearance. The authorities decided to cancel their plan to search Belinda's piece of land, as they needed to confirm in person that Amarjit was indeed safe to conclude the investigation. However, before the scheduled encounter at the passport agency on Monday, 3 men, Kenneth, William, and Peter, made an unexpected visit to Belinda's estate over the weekend, surprising Belinda. While there, they noticed a damaged path near the stable and decided to repair it with gravel. When a digger was later delivered to her estate, she took her children to the city, leaving the 3 men behind to repair the road. 2 days later, detectives went to the designated site to meet with Amarjit. When they arrived, they saw Hornsey and Kenneth's vehicle appear, stop briefly, and then leave as if the encounter had been cancelled. Kenneth went back to work at Chiba Freight, and the detectives decided to question Belinda again. Before this, Kenneth had warned her not to tell the police about the work he had done on her land. However, Belinda found his warning strange and decided to tell the investigators about it. She explained that some of Kenneth's associates had gone onto her farm without permission and dug a drainage trench, even though she hadn't asked for it. Belinda had unknowingly assisted the police significantly. The detectives quickly traveled to Devon, where they conducted excavations and thorough forensic tests with the help of experts. They searched through a piece of Belinda's land for 5 days, thinking they would find the remains of Amarjit and his family. However, nothing was discovered. After searching for more than 2 months in April 2003, the police realized that they had been searching in the wrong location. In the popular British holiday town of Bournemouth, Dorset, along the English Channel, a father and son, Dave and Carl, had planned a canoe trip for the evening. The sea was calm, the breeze was refreshing, and the climate ideal for a leisurely paddle. As they made their way through the water, they noticed something large floating in the distance. As they drew closer, they realized it was a badly decomposed body, severely swollen from being in the water for an extended period, making it hard to determine the person's identity. Carl quickly paddled back to shore to alert the authorities while his father, Dave, stayed with the body. Dave was left waiting alone in the darkness for nearly 3 hours as he waited for help to arrive. This harrowing experience would forever be etched in their memories. The body was later taken to a morgue in Bournemouth, but it took almost a week to identify it. The deceased was Amarjit Chauhan, a missing entrepreneur who had suffered severe head injuries and had his mouth taped shut. The autopsy revealed that he likely died from the head trauma and suffocation. His clothes were removed for forensic examination. Meanwhile, police searched for more clues 62 meters away in Belinda's field and made a significant discovery, including a pile of charred clothes, jewelry, and strands of hair that were later confirmed to belong to Amarjeet, as well as pieces of children's clothing. Initial investigations suggested that a family of 5 might be buried at the site. The once private property in Devon, owned by Belinda, was secretly used as a burial ground for the Amarjeet Chauhan family. When police became suspicious, the bodies were exhumed and taken by boat to the middle of the bay in Bournemouth, where they were dumped into the sea. Until a body was found, the staff at Chiba Freight held on to the hope that their employer might return someday, even if he had sold the business, as they expected him to say goodbye or make a visit in the future. However, all hopes shattered when the drowned man was confirmed as Amarjeet. The situation worsened as concern for the remaining family members grew. Nancy was merely 25 years old, and their children were just infants. The thought that someone could extinguish so many innocent lives was harrowing, yet all evidence pointed tragically in that direction. The excavation area was disproportionately large for the concealment of just one corpse. A smaller site would suffice for hiding a single individual. Furthermore, the simultaneous disappearance of Amarjeet along with Nancy, mother-in-law Chiranjit, and children, Ravinder and Devinder, suggested a tragic end. The investigation became a high-priority case because of very serious crimes. Kenneth became the main suspect, but he and his accomplice, William, had disappeared. Initial information suggested that Kenneth and William had fled to Europe, leaving their associate Peter Rees. Peter Rees, a 39-year-old, feeling intense guilt over his crime, unexpectedly confessed to a stranger he had just met about the circumstances of the Amarjeet family's tragic end. His confession was likely driven by a fear of being blamed entirely, as he couldn't believe his accomplice Kenneth would harm 2 innocent children. The stranger reported this information to the authorities, and Peter was arrested 12 days later. However, once in custody, Peter maintained his silence during police questioning, leaving the whereabouts and fate of the Amarjeet Chauhan family a mystery. 3 weeks after the Amarjeet body discovery, another body was found in the Solent, a part of the English Channel. Angkor was asked to identify the remains, which he recognized as those of his older sister, Nancy, despite the significant decomposition. The main suspects were eventually caught. Kenneth was arrested in Belgium after 2 months on the run, while William turned himself in 6 weeks later. However, even with the 3 suspects in custody, they refused to cooperate with the investigation. Despite the arrests, the case was still unsolved because 3 members of the Chauhan family were missing, and there were no eyewitnesses to their murders. The investigation now needed irrefutable evidence to move forward. The detectives were unaware that Amarjeet had left behind a crucial piece of evidence. In April 2005, the longest criminal trial in British history began, with the prosecution aiming to prove that Kenneth, William, and Peter were responsible for the kidnapping and murder of the Chauhan family. Over the course of the 10-month trial, more than 4,500 physical evidence items were examined. However, the analysis of phone communications formed the core of the prosecution's case. Amarjeet had initially met with Kenneth to discuss the sale of the company, but he was kidnapped and held captive at Kenneth's home. There, he was forced to sign documents that would make it seem to his employees that he had sold the business and moved abroad. A significant piece of evidence emerged when the son of William handed over a gray suitcase to the police containing a 4 sheets signed by Amarjeet. Reagan initially planned to kill only Amarjeet, but he realized that this would likely prompt the rest of the family to raise an alarm. As a result, he decided to target the entire family. On the day of the murder, Peter was tasked with keeping an eye on Amarjeet, while Kenneth and another accomplice, William, went to the family's home in London. They stayed there for several hours, but exactly how they killed the other family members remains unclear. Amarjeet was killed at Kenneth's home, which was then thoroughly renovated, including replacing all the furniture to destroy any evidence. 8 months later, a significant breakthrough occurred when forensic scientists re-examined Amarjeet's clothing. They found a folded letter in his right sock. The letter was addressed to Kenneth and dated February 12, 2003, proving that Amarjeet had been at Kenneth's residence on the day he disappeared. Unbeknownst to his killers, Amarjeet had intentionally left behind this clue. This crucial piece of evidence ultimately helped the police in their investigation. A lengthy 9-month trial ended with the jury's unanimous verdict. Peter Rees was sentenced to 23 years in prison for murdering Amarjeet Chauhan. Meanwhile, Kenneth Reagan and William Hornsey each received 5 consecutive life sentences for the murders of Nancy, Chiranjit Kaur, Ravinder, and Devinder, ensuring they would spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Later, the remains of Chiranjit Kaur, Amarjit's mother-in-law, were found off the coast of the Isle of Wight. Unfortunately, the bodies of the 2 young children, 18-month-old Devinder and 2-month-old Ravinder, were never recovered. It's often difficult to comprehend how someone could commit such atrocities against children. Typically, individuals who carry out these acts have psychological issues or are unaware of the severity of their actions. However, this was not the case with Kenneth. He was to be mentally sound. For him, the brutal acts he committed were simply a means to achieve his goals, and he showed no hesitation in taking innocent lives in pursuit of his own ambitions. Angkor was profoundly affected by the incident. He now lives in New Zealand, permanently separated from his nephews. A family video recorded just 2 days before they disappeared was found in their empty home. This heartbreaking video is the last remaining testament to a once joyful family torn apart by tragedy. The case of Christina and Thompson Harris. Christina and Thompson and Jason Thomas Harris, both 40, had been married for 11 years by 2014. They got married in 2003 after dating for about 5 years. In 2009, Christina and Jason welcomed their first child, which brought significant changes to their lives. Despite the daily challenges and responsibilities, they were happy to be parents. Christina took care of the house and the children while Jason worked at a plastics factory. As the children grew up, Christina was able to contribute financially to the family by working. However, in May 2014, she had to take maternity leave because she was expecting their second child in a few weeks. On September 29, 2014, Jason chatted with Christina while at work. Christina was suffering from a cold. She had a bad cough and was not sleeping well, but she reassured her husband that she was fine. A few hours later, Jason called his wife at home but received no response, which worried him. Unable to reach Christina, Jason asked a neighbor to check on her. He explained that Christina was sick and not answering the phone. The neighbor knocked on the front door but got no answer, so she called Christina's name. Receiving no response, she decided to try the door, found it unlocked, and entered the house. When she entered the bedroom, she found Christina lying on the bed and could not wake her. The neighbor called 911 and ran out of the house to call another neighbor, a nurse. The nurse checked Christina's pulse and confirmed that she had died. Thus, on September 29, 2014, for months after the birth of her second child, Christina was found dead at home. When the police arrived, Jason Harris was present. He told the police and paramedics that his wife had been sick but was alive when he left for work that morning. 2 days later, the medical examiner ruled that Christina died from an overdose of a controlled substance, a finding that shocked her family and friends. Most people who knew Christina, a mother of 2, including a newborn, believed that she had never used drugs. Christina's mother, Kathy, told police that her daughter was fine when she saw her the day before she died. Police were therefore skeptical of Jason Harris's claim that his wife had a cold. According to Kathy, Christina said her marriage to Jason was complicated. Jason was unhappy with the marriage but did not want a divorce because of concerns about child support and custody. Neighbors who discovered Christina's body also provided additional information to the police. Jason reportedly told them that the night before Christina died, he had prepared cereal with milk for her. Then Christina passed out and dropped the plate. Police realized that Christina's family and friends had a hard time accepting that she might be involved in drugs. Instead, police suspected that Jason Harris was involved in Christina's death. Christina's mother and sisters insisted that police test her breast milk. According to Kathy, the police ignored the request for 48 hours. However, thanks to the family's persistence, the police finally agreed to investigate. As a result, breast milk was used as evidence for the first time in Michigan history. As confirmed by Christina's family and friends, all drug tests at her workplace and at the hospital where she gave birth to her second child were negative. Her second child was only 4 months old when Christina died. Christina was breastfeeding, and Kathy confirmed that Christina was very careful about what she put into her body because she didn't want to affect her child. Christina often pumped breast milk while at work and stored it in the freezer. Some of the breast milk was left at Kathy's mother's house. They tested 3 bags of breast milk for possible drug residue. These bags were labeled with the date they were put in the freezer so Christina knew which bag to thaw first. Experts tested all the samples, including the ones frozen just before Christina died, and found no signs of drugs. This proves that Christina did not use the substance that killed her. Jason Harris's sister was the only one who suggested that Christina had used drugs, prompting investigators to focus more on Jason and treat Christina's death as a homicide. The investigation was slow, and it is unclear what would have happened if Christina's family had not been actively involved in the search for the truth. Kathy repeatedly reminded Davison police about her daughter's case in August 2016, nearly 2 years after Christina's death. Not seeing the enthusiasm and desire to solve her daughter's case in Davison, Kathy asked Davison police to turn the case over to the Michigan State Police, which had new investigators. From there, the story began to unravel. Police gathered a lot of information about Jason Harris, including how he acted before and after his wife's death. Jason had been having affairs with other women. Christina knew about this and confided in her family and co-workers that Jason had been texting other people while she was giving birth to their youngest child. Christina once told a co-worker that if she died, Jason would be the cause. When asked if she was serious, she said yes. Jason told his co-worker that he suspected the second child was not his biological child. He also complained that after the birth, Christina became depressed, often stayed in bed and did not go to work. Jason often complained about Christina nagging him. A co-worker of Jason recalled that Jason may have told him that he wanted Christina dead. He described the relationship between Jason and Christina as toxic and recalled that they argued frequently. One of the most surprising and shocking things about this case is that Jason Harris did not hesitate to let everyone know that he wanted to get rid of his wife. He tried to do so, but unfortunately, no one paid attention to his words and actions before Christina died. Jason bought poison twice and mixed it into her drink. Both times, Christina felt that the taste was unusual and did not drink it. Jason then asked a coworker to find him a poison that would not change the taste or smell of drinks or food. Jason said he wanted to knock Christina unconscious so she would not feel anything. When he shared with the coworker that Christina would not drink water because it tasted strange, the coworker refused to talk to him further. The coworker testified that Jason had talked about wanting Christina to stop nagging, and that the coworker thought Jason was joking. Jason also told a coworker that he had hired someone to kill Christina, but the person was arrested for another reason before the murder. Jason therefore offered the coworker $10,000 from Christina's $100,000 life insurance policy to kill her. The coworker refused the offer, thinking that Jason was just venting his anger by talking about his wife and making inappropriate jokes. According to the colleague, he recalled a conversation with Jason in which Jason said, "I'm bored with her. I'm going to dump her." The police then decided to question the neighbor who discovered Christina's body. The neighbor testified that she saw Christina's family truck in the driveway, but Christina did not come to the door. She entered the house and found Christina lying in bed, unresponsive. The neighbor asked Jason if she should try to wake her up. He replied that Christina must have fallen asleep and that he would come home. The neighbor went back inside and removed the covers around Christina because she felt cold and had foam coming from her mouth and nose. The neighbor called 911 and another neighbor who was a registered nurse. The neighbor, who was a registered nurse, testified that Christina was cold, stiff, had no pulse, and had white foam coming from her mouth. She did not attempt to resuscitate Christina because she believed she was already dead. Jason told the police that he asked a neighbor to check on Christina and that he had to rush home because Christina was unresponsive. However, witnesses said Jason did not appear anxious or in a hurry. What raised suspicions about Jason was that morning he called Christina's supervisor at work. He told her that Christina had died the night before and that he wanted to inquire about the $100,000 death benefit from Christina's life insurance policy through work. Additionally, one of the women, Jason, had an intimate relationship with told investigators that Jason had contacted her on the day of Christina's death and said that his wife had died from an overdose of a controlled substance. This suggests that he knew what caused Christina's death even before the medical examiner's report. That evening, the neighbor he had asked to check on Christina saw him in his driveway. She said that Jason told her that Christina was not the angel her parents thought she was, and that their child would soon learn all the good and bad things about Christina. He said that Christina dropped her bowl of cereal, and he told her to go to bed. Jason also told a neighbor that his wife tossed and turned during the night, and that he heard her coughing before he left for work. Jason wondered if that was her last breath. Jason told a police officer that Christina was coughing a lot when he left the house. He also told the police that Christina fell asleep eating cereal the night before she died. Finally, Jason told Christina's mother, Kathy, that before she died, Christina complained that her water tasted like chemicals. One of the main motives in this case is believed to be insurance money. Within a week of Christina's death, Jason and his mother went to Christina's workplace to inquire about the life insurance money. Additionally, Jason received a $20,000 death benefit from a life insurance policy issued by his company shortly after Christina's death. One of Jason's lovers moved in with Jason and his children. Christina's mother believed that Jason's lover moved in with him after Christina's funeral. However, Jason's neighbor testified that the lover had even moved into Jason's home before Christina's funeral. The neighbor added that Jason's adult children from a previous marriage moved into the home within days of Christina's death. Police also discovered that Jason Harris purchased a plane ticket to Rhode Island 9 days after Christina's death to visit a woman with whom he had exchanged more than 5,800 text messages. County Medical Examiner Dr. Brian Hunter submitted postmortem blood and urine samples for laboratory testing. Dr. Hunter determined that the test results were consistent with Christina being poisoned by a lethal substance. Initially, Dr. Hunter determined that her death was an accident because there were no injection marks on Christina's body, and investigators did not find any powder residue or rolling papers next to the bed where Christina died. In 2016, the Michigan State Police took over the investigation into Christina's death. In 2019, after Christina's family disputed Christina's cause of death, Dr. Hunter later changed Christina's death certificate from an accident to a homicide. Police charged Jason with first-degree murder, solicitation of murder, and delivery of a controlled substance resulting in death. He was denied bail. Jason's attorney, Nicholas Robinson, said his client pleaded not guilty to the charges and wanted to fight them. When he was arrested, Jason had lost his job after testing positive for drugs. Kathy's efforts to ensure that law enforcement would punish the person responsible for her daughter's death were not overlooked. Gena's County Prosecutor David Layton said that a few years ago, he began receiving Facebook messages and emails from a Davidson woman who claimed her daughter had died and that her death was not an accident. "It can't be happening," the woman told the prosecutor. She was certain that someone had caused her daughter's death. Kathy's passionate pleas caught David Layton's attention, prompting authorities to re-examine the death of her daughter, Christina. "I will never forget what she wrote in an email, prosecutor. You are my last hope. This is our last chance to get justice for my daughter. Please help me," David Layton said. "At that moment, and as I spoke to her this morning, I was absolutely convinced that her daughter's death was not an accident. It was the result of foul play. It was Kathy's relentless efforts to seek justice for her daughter's death that led to this situation. And those efforts paid off." The trial began in 2020. The prosecution alleged that Jason put a controlled substance in his wife's cereal bowl to kill her. He then went to work as usual, waited a few hours, and asked a neighbor to check on Christina. According to the prosecution, Jason wanted someone else to discover his wife's body in order to reduce suspicion against him. The direct evidence against Jason was overwhelming. Jason had a motive for killing Christina. He was having an affair with another woman, suspected she was cheating on him, believed the second child was not his, and was tired of her nagging. Jason did not want a divorce because he did not want to pay child support or lose custody of her. Before her death, Jason told a coworker that he wanted Christina dead. On the morning of her death, Jason called her company to inquire about a $100,000 life insurance policy. And in that call, he said Christina had died the night before. The jury heard clear evidence that Jason not only wanted Christina dead, but that he had tried to hire someone to kill her. He planned to do this and knew where to buy illegal drugs. In fact, he had purchased them on multiple occasions to give to Christina. At trial, multiple witnesses testified that Christina did not use drugs recreationally. Christina was very careful about what she consumed because she was breastfeeding. Furthermore, tests showed that her frozen breast milk contained no harmful substances. To support the theory that Jason had poisoned Christina's food, the prosecution presented toxicology reports. For example, Dr. Judge argued that Christina's death could have been caused by ingestion of some kind of poison. The prosecution ruled out injection because no traces of injection or needles were found at the scene. Dr. Judge also testified that inhalation was unlikely because no rolled-up dollar bills or snorting paper were found at the scene. The court gave Jason Harris a chance to speak, but he did not apologize or show remorse. Instead, he insisted that he was innocent. The judge said the jury did not believe your lies, ultimately exposing him as a selfish and deceitful murderer. On November 17, 2021, the jury found Jason Harris, 47, guilty on all charges. 3 weeks later, The court sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He has appealed the verdict, however. After the trial, prosecutor David Layton expressed his condolences to Christina's family and friends, emphasizing that this was a tragic case. Layton went on to say, "While this case has many unique and media-driven details, the most important thing is the family's loss. I hope this verdict helps them find comfort in knowing that justice has been served." Jason requested a new trial on the grounds that his defense attorney did not do a good job. He introduced evidence in the form of his attorney's testimony, showing that his defense attorney failed to seek an independent expert opinion on the prosecution's evidence and failed to consult with an independent toxicologist. Jason's defense attorney explained this decision as part of a trial strategy because he had thoroughly questioned Dr. Hunter and was able to show the jury that Dr. Hunter had changed his opinion about the cause of death based on information from a related civil lawsuit. In February 2024, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld Jason Harris's conviction. He remains in prison for life without the possibility of parole. Case of Brooke Skylar Richardson. In Ohio, the Richardson family, consisting of Kim, Scott, and their children Jackson and Skylar, seemed like a typical family. Skylar was a cheerleader who struggled with an eating disorder from a young age. Her mother Kim first noticed this when Skylar was 12 years old and refused to buy gum with more than 5 calories. As a flyer on the cheerleading squad, Skylar felt pressured to maintain a certain weight. This obsession with her body image led to a constant fear of gaining weight. During cheerleading season, Skylar started throwing up after meals to control her weight, which only made her issues worse. When the season ended, her struggles intensified. Skylar experienced episodes of binge eating, followed by periods of starvation or extreme dieting. Her parents grew concerned, but Skylar shut down whenever they tried to talk to her about it. They sought professional help from various doctors and therapists, who eventually diagnosed Skylar with body dysmorphia, a condition where she obsessively focused on a perceived flaw in her appearance. In July 2016, Skylar began dating a friend's cousin, but the relationship didn't last long. By January 2017, she had moved on to a new boyfriend, Brandon, and seemed genuinely happy and healthy. Her parents noticed her weight gain and thought her eating disorder was under control. In February, Skylar picked out her prom dress, a tightly fitted gown that required her to be laced into it. During a family vacation in mid-March, she wore a 2-piece bathing suit and looked wonderful. Her mom, Kim, wanted her to start taking birth control pills to protect her health. In mid-April 2017, Skylar visited her mother's gynecologist to obtain a prescription for birth control. However, during the visit, the doctor informed Skylar that she was approximately 8 months pregnant. Skylar requested the doctor not to tell anyone, and her mother remained unaware of the real reason behind her tears. Skylar and her boyfriend Brandon attended the prom on May 5th, despite her advanced pregnancy. 2 months later, on July 14, 2017, the police showed up at the Richardson home. They informed Skylar's parents, Kim and Scott, that they needed to speak to the teenager about something she may have witnessed. The police officers assured the parents that Skylar was not in trouble and took her at their word. Scott decided to drive Skylar to the police station, unsure of what awaited them. The police wanted to question Skylar regarding a call they received from a gynecologist's office. A patient of an OBGYN doctor gave birth to a stillborn baby and buried it in their backyard. The police were informed and took Skylar, the patient, into custody for questioning. Her father was not allowed to be present during the initial interview. The police read Skylar her rights and shared the details of the doctor's report. According to the doctor, Skylar had discovered her pregnancy on April 26th, but later reported that the baby was not alive and had been buried in the backyard. Skylar admitted to the police that she had given birth to a stillborn baby girl on May 7, 2017. She explained that she delivered the baby in the bathroom, noticed it was not breathing, and had no heartbeat. Feeling the need to bury the baby, she retreated to the backyard, dug a shallow grave, and buried the body. To mark the spot, she placed a vase with a flower at the burial site. The police informed Skylar's parents, Kim and Scott, about the true reason for her detention. They were shocked to learn that Skylar had been pregnant, as they had no idea. They expressed sadness that Skylar had gone through this ordeal alone and without their support. Skylar revealed that she had named the baby Annabelle and claimed the father was a close friend's cousin, whom she briefly dated. Crime scene investigators searched the Richardson backyard, removing weeds and debris to uncover the baby's remains. Despite the challenges, they found several bones, including pieces of the skull, which they carefully collected and preserved. After more than 5 hours of questioning, Skylar and her parents were allowed to return home. However, 6 days later, the police contacted Skylar again, informing her that they had received new information from the coroner's office. They claimed that the baby's bones showed signs of burning, which Skylar vehemently denied. She insisted that she would never harm her child. Police suggested that Skylar might have tried to cremate the baby to hide the evidence, but she continued to deny any wrongdoing. However, Skylar suddenly changed her story, admitting that she may have used a lighter to try and cremate the baby's remains. She also stated that the baby might have been born alive and made a noise or even cried before dying. Skylar confessed to holding the newborn too tightly, which might have contributed to its death. During a lengthy interrogation, the police gathered enough evidence to arrest Skylar on a charge of reckless homicide. They believed she had suffocated her baby. After presenting the case to a grand jury, Skylar was indicted and arrested for aggravated murder, which carries a mandatory life sentence in Ohio. At her arraignment, Skylar pleaded not guilty to additional charges of voluntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and endangering children. She spent the weekend in jail until her family secured a $50,000 bond. Skylar became the center of a media frenzy following her child's tragic death. The public judged and scrutinized every move she and her family made, taking a toll on their well-being. They retreated to the safety of their home, but even stepping outside became difficult due to threats and photographers. Despite her defense attorneys believing Skylar gave a false confession, the prosecution pressed forward with their case. Even when the medical examiner retracted her initial report of burning, the prosecution clung to Skylar's admission that she had attempted to cremate the remains. Throughout this period, Skylar's family endured immense stress and fear. The public scrutiny and threats made their lives unbearable, and they struggled to navigate a world under constant scrutiny. Skylar's defense attorneys worked tirelessly to defend her against the charges. Skylar's family raised the $50,000 bail, but as a condition of her release, she was ordered to wear an ankle bracelet. She remained confined to her home, avoiding public appearances. Over 12 months, Skylar's life took a different path. Her university plans were put on hold as she awaited trial for her baby's murder. The charges were serious, and the defense filed a motion to move the trial to a different county, but it was denied. Skylar faced the trial in the original jurisdiction, grappling with the emotional and psychological impact of the allegations and her isolation. Spending time with her dogs provided comfort and companionship as she awaited her trial. Her family stood by her, believing in her innocence and hoping the truth would come to light. Despite the challenges, Skylar remained determined to fight for her freedom. In July 2019, the state offered a plea deal. If Skylar pleaded guilty to the remaining charges, they would withdraw the aggravated murder charge. Skylar's parents were conflicted about the decision, but after careful consideration, Skylar turned down the plea deal. This decision terrified her parents, who wondered if she made the right choice, but they knew it was her decision, not theirs. Skylar went on trial on September 3, 2019 for the murder of her newborn baby girl. The prosecution presented as evidence a text message Skylar sent to her mother shortly after giving birth, saying she was happy and excited that her belly had returned to its normal size. They claimed this showed Skylar was relieved to be rid of her baby. The prosecution alleged that Skylar sent more texts to her mother and boyfriend within 24 hours of the baby's death, conveying her excitement and happiness. They pointed to phrases like, "I'm so excited and I feel so much better this morning," as proof of her guilt. The state believed Skylar was thrilled about the baby's death and attempted to hide her guilt. The prosecution also claimed Skylar had no intention of keeping her baby and presented evidence that she had searched online for ways to get rid of the baby. They alleged that Skylar's mother had threatened that her life would end if she became pregnant, which instilled fear in Skylar. On the third day of the trial, a doctor testified that the baby's death was a violent homicide, but admitted she couldn't determine when the baby's skull fractures occurred. The defense challenged the doctor's findings, suggesting she may have been biased. The defense also questioned the doctor's methods, pointing out that she didn't examine the remains under a microscope or consult with an obstetrician. Another doctor, a fetal medicine specialist, testified that it was unlikely the baby was stillborn, citing Skylar's admission that she felt the baby moving inside her. The prosecution's case included shocking evidence, including images of the deceased baby's remains, which visibly affected Skylar during the trial. Skylar's reaction to seeing pictures of her baby's remains was to stare straight ahead, avoiding eye contact. This stoic behavior contrasted with her emotional response the previous day when the judge entered the room. Skylar's defense attorneys argued that her life was far from perfect, even before the murder accusation. They claimed the prosecution's evidence was incomplete and misleading, and some texts were taken out of context. They emphasized that Skylar's frequent use of certain language did not prove she murdered her daughter. The defense highlighted Skylar's mental health struggles, particularly her long battle with an eating disorder. They presented evidence of her regular visits to a psychologist and nutritionist, along with pictures showing her varying weights and appearances. They argued that despite her physical state, Skylar tried to comfort and care for the lifeless body after giving birth. Skylar's attorney explained that she intended to tell her family about the pregnancy, but never had the chance. According to her doctor, she had 8 to 10 weeks before delivery and planned to attend prom and graduate before telling her mother, whom she knew would be unsupportive. An obstetrician testified that the baby was stillborn, and Skylar's description of the baby's appearance suggested it was not a healthy newborn. The doctor pointed out that Skylar only gained 15 pounds during pregnancy, possibly restricting the baby's development due to her eating disorder. The defense aimed to cast doubt on Skylar's statements to the police, suggesting she only told them what they wanted to hear. They argued that other factors may have contributed to the baby's death, and Skylar did not harm the baby. Skylar Richardson's trial lasted for 1 week, after which the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning a verdict. She was acquitted of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment, but convicted of abuse of a corpse, a felony that carries a sentence of up to 1 year in prison. The judge ordered her to be held in jail until her sentencing hearing, which took place the next day. During the sentencing hearing, Skylar apologized for her actions and acknowledged the harm she had caused. The judge strongly admonished her for her role in the tragic loss of her baby, believing that if she had made better decisions during her pregnancy, her child would still be alive today. The judge sentenced her to 3 years probation for abuse of a corpse, emphasizing that her actions were morally reprehensible and illegal. In November 2020, a judge granted her request to terminate her probation 2 years early, acknowledging her progress and agreeing that she no longer required supervision. Since being acquitted, Skylar has taken advantage of her opportunity to demonstrate her rehabilitation. She has completed 2 semesters of college and has been working part-time at the law firm that represented her. Although she has faced challenges in finding employment due to her probationary status, Skylar remains determined to pursue her career goals, including attending law school and becoming a public defender. Today we'll delve into the mysterious case of Donata Machow, a twisted cold case from 1984 that was finally solved after almost 4 decades. East Windsor is a township located in Mercer County, New Jersey. Situated in the central part of the state, it is known for its suburban character and proximity to major cities like Trenton and Princeton. East Windsor offers a blend of residential areas, commercial centers, and natural landscapes. The township is home to various parks, recreational facilities, and cultural attractions, providing residents and visitors with ample opportunities for outdoor activities and community engagement. But despite this idyllic setting, this place would become the home of a heinous crime. Donna D. Machow's journey began on October 16, 1964, in the town of East Windsor, nestled within Mercer County. She was the cherished daughter of Betty Lou Thompson Machow and Ronald Wayne Machow. As the years went by, Donna's family expanded with the arrival of a younger sister, Julie Machow, in 1969. Life took a turn when their mother, Betty, found love again and married a man named Garland. Together they formed a blended family. Donna and Julie embraced their new life, with her beloved stepfather by their side. Donna Machow had a zest for life that radiated through her love for cooking and sewing. Alongside her job as a legal secretary, she harbored dreams of a career in modeling. For Julie, Donna was a shining star. Despite the challenges that came her way, Donna never lost her sparkle and continued to embrace life with open arms. Little did she know that her path would take an unexpected and tragic turn, forever altering the lives of those who cherished her. On February 25, 1984, it seemed like a typical Saturday night for 14-year-old Julie Machow, who was relaxing at her family's home in East Windsor, when she noticed her 19-year-old sister, Donna D. Machow's car parked outside. She joined her in the basement. Together they spent the night watching scary movies until 2 a.m. At that point, Julie went upstairs to her bed, ready to rest for the night. Their mother Betty and stepfather Garland were peacefully asleep upstairs during that time. They were unaware of any unusual sounds or disturbances emanating from the basement. The following day, on February 26, 1984, Donna was expected to go to work at a law firm, so her absence during the day didn't initially raise alarm bells. However, as dinner time arrived and Donna still hadn't returned home, her mother began to worry. Concerned for her daughter's well-being, decided to investigate by venturing downstairs to check the basement apartment. As Betty entered Donna's usually neat and organized apartment, she was greeted by a disarray of items scattered about. It was evident that a struggle had taken place within those walls. The sight of blood-stained clothes peeped together heightened her growing unease, prompting her to immediately contact the police. Once the police arrived at the scene, they meticulously combed through the entire basement, their eyes keenly scanning for any trace that could unravel the mystery. Their diligence paid off when they discovered faint fingerprints near a table close to the bed. Recognizing the potential significance of these fingerprints, they carefully collected them as evidence. Alongside the blood-stained clothes, they also uncovered traces of bodily fluid in the bedroom, an essential clue that held the promise of leading them closer to the identity of the perpetrator and help in finding Donna. In the search for answers, investigators made a grim discovery. In March 1984, when they found Donna Michaud's abandoned blood-stained car near a sewer plant roughly a mile away from her home. However, despite this lead, the mystery surrounding her disappearance endured. Investigators meticulously combed through countless records. They diligently interviewed the residents living in the vicinity of Donna Michaud's residence, determined to unearth any clue that could lead them to the truth. As fate would have it, the investigation took a significant turn when they suspected a number of people, including Nathaniel Harvey, a former worker at a nearby farm and resident of East Windsor. He had been apprehended and detained for his alleged involvement in a series of assaults and a chilling murder in the Plainsboro area. But all the leads, including Harvey, did not pan out at that time. The significant piece of evidence, the bodily fluid that investigators found in Donna Michaud's bedroom, also went for testing. However, the technology for DNA testing was not as advanced as it is today, and the testing conducted at that time lacked the precision needed to pinpoint the source of the bodily fluid. But the investigators didn't close the case and hoped that one day they would come up with some solid leads that would help them solve Donna Michaud's murder mystery. The weight of the tragedy became too much for Donna's stepfather, who tragically passed away just 6 months after Donna vanished, leaving the family to bear the weight of their grief alone. The family went to great lengths in their search for the killer. They hired private investigators, trackers, and even sought the help of psychics. They poured all their resources into the effort, spending every last penny they had. Their hope never wavered. They held on to the belief that somehow, maybe, just maybe, their loved one was still alive. They couldn't shake the thought that perhaps she was injured. After exhausting all possible avenues to finding the identity of the killer, seeking solace and a fresh start, Julie and her mother made the difficult decision to move to Texas in 1987. However, their journey to healing was further marred by misfortune when their storage unit was burglarized, robbing them of precious memories. The thieves callously snatched away family photos, cherished mementos, and 16 boxes filled with investigation files, adding another layer of pain. 11 years went by, but there was no news. But on April 2, 1995, police officers got a call from a Boy Scout troop about a body they found near Cranberry. It was not in good condition, almost completely decomposed. But when they got the dental records back, they couldn't believe they had found the most important part of the puzzle. They had been searching for the last decade. It was the body of Donna D. Michaud, concealed within a carpet in a wooded area near a cranberry farm, not far from where her car had been recovered. After her remains were sent for an autopsy, initial findings indicated that Donna had tragically suffered a gunshot wound to the head. However, as the case investigation progressed, the dedicated experts at the Middle Assault Regional Medical Examiner's Office delved deeper into her remains. Through careful examination, they discovered that her cause of death was indeed a head injury, although it couldn't be definitively determined as a gunshot wound. Nevertheless, the cause of death was amended to evidence of homicidal violence, and her death continued to be classified as a homicide. With this crucial lead unable to yield conclusive results, the investigation gradually reached a standstill, and the case eventually fell into the abyss of unsolved mysteries. In February 2022, Mercer County Prosecutor Angelo Onofre directed the reopening of the Donna Michaud case. The case was handed over to the Office of Public Integrity and Accountability Central Regional Cold Case Task Force, a dedicated group within the statewide cold case network established by the New Jersey Attorney General in 2019. As part of the reopened investigation, all relevant physical evidence, including DNA samples, was carefully resubmitted to the state police's Central Regional Laboratory. This step aimed to leverage advanced forensic techniques and technology in the pursuit of truth and justice. Modern DNA technology played a crucial role in shedding new light on the case. The evidence, the bodily fluid which was found from Donna Machao's bedroom, was carefully re-examined and it conclusively matched the DNA profile to Nathaniel Harvey. Astonishingly, his DNA was the only genetic material found in the room that should not have been present, according to the Attorney General's office. It was a breakthrough that provided clarity and closure to the long-standing mystery. Nathaniel Harvey, born in 1942 in East Windsor, had a troubled past right from the beginning. He had a knack for trouble and found himself behind bars for most of his life. In 1968, he got married, but the identity of his wife is not known. Living in East Windsor, Harvey had a long list of crimes to his name. He was also described as a daring intruder by the West Windsor police, and he had been convicted of assault. It was said that during his crimes, Harvey would sneak into unlocked homes where he would take young women hostage and commit acts of violence. The authorities always had their eyes on him, considering him a potential suspect in their search for justice. One such case was of Irene Schnaps, who was also a resident of East Windsor. During the years of 1984 and 1985, the local authorities were faced with a growing concern as a series of burglaries rattled Plainsboro, West Windsor, and nearby neighborhoods. The authorities were also grappling with the unsolved murder of Irene Schnaps and the perplexing disappearance of Donna Machao, who vanished from her family's East Windsor home. 16 months after Donna Machao's disappearance, tragedy struck again in East Windsor when Irene Schnaps, a 37-year-old woman who had recently lost her husband to cancer, was killed. The incident occurred overnight on Saturday, June 15, 1985, or in the early hours of the following day. Concerned for her well-being, one of Irene's colleagues at RCA Americom went to her apartment the next morning, June 16, 1985, on Research Way after she failed to show up for work. With trembling hands, he informed the police about the tragic scene that he had encountered. Inside the apartment, a heart-wrenching sight awaited the investigators. Irene Schnapp suffered a barrage of over 15 vicious blows to her head, inflicted by an axe or hatchet. The room bore gruesome evidence of the tragedy, with Irene's lifeless body lying on cloth in her blood-soaked bedroom. Amidst the chilling scene, a crimson-stained footprint on a pillowcase was discovered, becoming a vital clue that held the potential to unlock the mystery behind her tragic demise. Peter Stoesser, a 41-year-old man, stepped forward to share his account with the investigators. As a friendly acquaintance of Irene Schnapp's, he revealed that he may have been the last person to have seen her alive. Shortly after sharing his connection to Irene Schnapp's, Stoesser's life took an unexpected turn. The police began frequent visits to his doorstep and, one Saturday, June 17, 1985, Stillwasser found himself taken to the Middle Assault Prosecutor's office, where he spent the entire day under intense scrutiny, facing a barrage of questions regarding Irene's tragic murder. He confessed to developing feelings of attraction towards her, envisioning a potential romantic connection. However, Irene, still grieving the loss of her husband, expressed the need for time and space before considering any new relationships. As Stoesser eagerly anticipated the right moment to express his romantic feelings, he maintained a friendly connection with Irene. He extended invitations to his lively gatherings, hosting barbecues for neighbors and friends, in an effort to ensure she didn't feel alone. However, their potential relationship was abruptly shattered when Irene met her tragic end, testing suspicion upon Stoesser as the primary suspect. Law enforcement also obtained a search warrant for Stoesser's residence. During the search, they discovered a quilt that bore suspicious-looking stains, possibly blood-related. Additionally, from his car, investigators seized a pair of white work gloves and a metal strip exhibiting reddish spots. Upon conducting tests on the quilt, it was revealed to contain human blood, accompanied by hairs that seemed to match those of the victim. Stoesser, however, maintained that the stains on the quilt originated from menstrual blood belonging to another woman he was involved with. As the investigation progressed, Stoesser underwent a lie detector test, which he did not pass, although the results of such tests were not considered admissible in court. Additionally, it came to light that he had a history of serving time in jail for stalking a former girlfriend. However, the police eventually eliminated Stoesser as a primary suspect, largely due to a significant discrepancy in shoe sizes. Stoesser wore size 12 shoes, whereas a bloody footprint at the crime scene indicated a size 6 shoe. This unexpected mismatch in foot size shifted the focus of the investigation elsewhere. However, on October 28, 1985, the breakthrough in the case occurred. On that very day, Nathaniel Harvey embarked on a rampage through the southern part of West Windsor, ultimately leading to a significant turning point in the investigation. The initial call that reached the dispatch center reported an alarming incident in Dutch Neck Estates. It was a chilling account of a 13-year-old girl who had narrowly escaped an attempted abduction from her own home, and the man covered her mouth in an attempt to take her away. However, her bravery prevailed as she managed to free herself and let out a piercing scream, alerting her parents to the danger. Startled by the commotion, he fled the scene. After fleeing the home in Dutch Neck Estates, that man broke into another house, probably to hide from the police. He was confronted by the homeowner. He turned on the light and saw Nathaniel Harvey standing there threatening him with an axe. Sensing the imminent danger, Harvey swiftly pivoted, shattering the glass door with the powerful swing of the axe, and ran off into the woods. With the chilling affinity for axes, Harvey had developed a disturbing pattern of wielding these menacing tools to instill fear in his victims. Even when armed with a knife during one of the assaults he committed, he deceitfully claimed to possess an axe, further fueling the terror. It wasn't lost on the astute law enforcement officials that the murder weapon used in the Irene Schnepp's killing was believed to be an axe, adding another haunting connection to Harvey's modus operandi. A short time later, investigators diligently canvassed the area, and their sharp eyes caught sight of Harvey traversing a soybean field, and then ran off into the woods. The police swiftly descended upon the scene, converging on Harvey's location near the Princeton Arms shopping center. It was there at the intersection of Old Trenton Road and Dorchester Drive that a state trooper apprehended Harvey. During questioning, police learned of the extent of Harvey's one-man crime spree, confessed to a string of burglaries that had struck fear into the community. However, the extent of his depravity became even more harrowing as it revealed the details of a recent assault. Prior to the tragic murder of Irene, Harvey had abducted a young girl from East Windsor, forcefully taking her to an abandoned building nestled along Dutch Neck Road. He revealed that the victim, who was actually Donna Michaud, innocently stepped out onto her deck to indulge in a cigarette, only to be seized by his relentless grip. After Harvey's arrest, the 13-year-old girl was called to identify if Harvey was the man who attacked her on October 28, 1985. Through her courageous testimony, she ultimately identified Harvey as her assailant. The authorities made a difficult decision not to pursue charges in the case due to the extremely brutal and perverse nature of the attack, considering the potential impact it would have on the victim's well-being. However, a breakthrough came when investigators finally received a search warrant and conducted a thorough search of Harvey's car in November 1985, which was located in the Princeton Arms apartment complex. Inside, they uncovered compelling evidence, directly linking him to the Irene Schnepp's murder. Alongside stolen items from various recent burglaries, a significant discovery was made. A Seiko watch that was positively identified as belonging to Irene and having been taken from her apartment at the time of the tragic murder. This crucial find provided a solid connection between Harvey and the crime. In an intriguing twist, it was discovered that Harvey's wife resided in the same apartment complex as Irene. However, this information had to be kept confidential due to his wife's reliance on state assistance. Additionally, authorities asserted that Harvey initially admitted to the murder of Irene during his questioning at the West Windsor Police Headquarters, where he was confronted with various matters. It was during this intense moment that Harvey requested to speak with his father, who offered him crucial advice to do the right thing. In a surprising turn of events, Harvey then made a confession regarding the Irene Schnepp's murder. Following Harvey's apprehension, the quilt that had been seized from Stoesser, the neighbor of Irene, who was also seen as a person of interest in the murder, was returned to him. Additionally, the glove and metal strip, confiscated from his car, underwent testing by prosecutors, revealing negative results for the presence of blood. In 1986, Harvey was convicted for the murder of Irene Schnepp. However, for years later in 1990, the state Supreme Court overturned his conviction, stating that his confession had been obtained without properly informing him of his Miranda rights. Harvey, who now maintained that his confession was coerced, immediately retracted his statement. This turn of events raised concerns about the validity of his initial confession and ignited a debate about whether he should have been reminded of his Miranda rights after speaking with his father. The question of Harvey's confession became a point of contention as conflicting accounts emerged. According to Avik Kleiner, the attorney of Harvey, he denied confessing to the murder of Irene, contradicting the police's assertion that he had admitted to the crime. even though the confession was not recorded. The initial conviction was overturned based on the court's ruling that Harvey should have been reminded of his Miranda rights after requesting to speak to his father during questioning. In 1994, as the case went to a second trial, the focus shifted to the crucial evidence of blood found at the crime scene. The prosecution presented DNA evidence that revealed genetic traits matching both Harvey's blood sample and the stains on a box spring in Irene Schnapp's apartment. The DNA testing, although still in its early stages, indicated that Harvey could not be ruled out as a contributor. To further strengthen their case, prosecution experts utilized dot intensity analysis, a technique that estimated the consistency between the blood characteristics found at the scene and Harvey's DNA. They determined that such a match would occur in only 1 out of every 1,400 African American individuals. However, the defense experts countered, arguing that the ratio could potentially be as low as 1 in 50. This time Harvey was convicted and received the death sentence. However, this verdict was upheld by a divided state Supreme Court in 1997, with some justices expressing differing views. Justice Alan B. Handler, in his dissenting opinion, carefully scrutinized the 64-page analysis of the DNA presented in the case. He voiced his doubts and expressed confidence that at some point in the future, either the state or federal court would likely reverse the decision. In a surprising turn of events, according to an article in the New York Times on May 15, 2005, Kleiner, the attorney of Harvey, pointed a finger of accusation at Peter Stowesser, a former neighbor of Irene. Although Stowesser was once considered a possible suspect by the police, he was subsequently ruled out. Kleiner implicated Stowesser, who is now 61 years old and residing in Hightstown, in both the Irene case and the murder of Donna Machow from East Windsor, who went missing in 1984 and whose body was discovered in 1995. These claims made by Kleiner garnered significant attention, making headlines in the New Jersey section of the Sunday New York Times. He also strongly disputed the accuracy of the blood DNA evidence presented during Harvey's second trial, claiming it to be flawed and contaminated. Additionally, he demanded further DNA testing on other pieces of evidence collected in the case, suggesting that they could have implicated Stowesser instead. Kleiner raised concerns about missing evidence, including the absence of hair from the quilt. He expressed suspicion regarding the classification of the retrieved hair, noting that it was initially labeled as Caucasian and later had the phrase and 1 necroid hair. Kleiner alleged that all the hair evidence, technician's notes, and microfilm have mysteriously vanished, leading him to believe that the hair evidence never actually existed. Capsack, who continued to serve as a prosecutor in Middle Assault County, expressed unwavering confidence in Harvey's conviction, firmly asserting that Stowesser played no part in the crime. According to Capsack, Stowesser was initially considered as a possible suspect in the case, but he was ultimately eliminated as a prime suspect. The decisive factor was the discovery of a size 6 bloody sneaker print on the victim's pillow, which contradicted Stowesser's size 12 foot. Interestingly, the article failed to mention that Harvey himself wore a size 6 sneaker. However, he clarified that Stowesser's involvement was merely circumstantial and not indicative of his guilt. In April 2007, Judge John F. Malone of the State Superior Court made a decision that dashed Harvey's hopes for a new evidentiary hearing and dismissed his habeas corpus challenge. He overturned Harvey's 1994 conviction, originally a death sentence, due to inadequate legal assistance provided to him during the early 1990s. Despite this development, Harvey, 65 years old, would still serve a 70-year sentence for a separate charge. The death sentence he received in 1994 had been reduced to life in prison without parole when New Jersey abolished capital punishment in 2007. Prior to this abolition, Harvey had spent 20 years on death row, although the state had not carried out an execution since 1963. However, late November 2020, Harvey died in the State Woods State Prison in Bridgeton, which eventually closed all the doors of any further investigation. Peter Stowesser was considered a suspect in the murder of Donna Machow. The remains of Machow were found in 1995, approximately a mile away from the location of the Irene crime scene. It was claimed that Machow and Stowesser were both enrolled in classes at Mercer County College during the fall of 1983. It was pointed out that after Machow went missing, Stowesser did not attend the spring session classes that he had previously registered for. However, Stowesser maintains that although he attended Mercer County College, he had no knowledge of Machow or any connection to her. Harvey also was connected to Donna Machow, as the discovery of Donna's remains was in a wooded area near the farm where Harvey had briefly been employed, which raised suspicion. Adding to the puzzle was the finding of her abandoned car near a sewer plant. conveniently within walking distance of Harvey's residence. These curious circumstances were enough for authorities to focus their attention on Harvey, exploring the possibility of his involvement in the case. Finally, in the last week of April 2023, New Jersey Attorney General Matthew J. Platkin announced that the conclusive identification as the person responsible for the assault and murder of Donna Michaud. The state's Attorney General said the case was finally cracked when investigators took a fresh look at this decades-old mystery. Colonel Patrick Callahan, superintendent of the New Jersey State Police, said that as 4 decades have passed, the memory of a young life, cruelly taken away, still lingers, haunting the hearts of those who loved her. The predator responsible callously discarded her remains in a shallow grave, leaving them undisturbed for over a decade. However, time cannot extinguish the burning desire for justice. Even though the perpetrator met his fate behind bars, serving time for another heinous crime, and ultimately passing away in 2020, it does not diminish the significance of this long-awaited resolution. We commend the relentless efforts of the Central Regional Cold Case Task Force and the dedicated state police forensic scientists, who hopefully have brought a modicum of solace to the victim's grieving family after all these years. The determination and dedication of law enforcement and forensic experts serve as a reminder that the pursuit of justice knows no time limit. Ardith Wood, a stunning 27-year-old, was not only beautiful, but also exceptionally intelligent. She was on the path to earning a doctoral degree in philosophy from Waterloo University while simultaneously working as an editor for a philosophy journal. Ardith's dream of becoming a professor was about to come true. The summer of 2003 arrived. Ardith decided to spend her vacation visiting her family in Ottawa, Canada. She had a wonderful time with her loved ones, going on walks together and cooking at home. On the morning of August 6th, the young woman went for a run. When she returned, her thoughtful parents were already waiting for her with a delicious breakfast dessert. It was a warm and sunny day, so Ardith decided to go for a bike ride. Her brother kindly allowed her to borrow his bicycle. The girl promised to be back in a couple of hours. That day, her mother planned to go shopping before lunch, awaiting her daughter's return from the ride. Ardith loved cycling along the picturesque route through the forest, past the river and cliffs. This trail was popular among local cyclists. It was always peaceful and safe here, but not this time. 27-year-old Ardith never came home. Her mother was worried about her. And then a heavy downpour started. The woman understood that her daughter wouldn't be riding in such weather. But time passed, and she still wasn't back. The family set out to search, assuming the girl might have fallen off her bike and needed help. Bike paths wound through the entire city, and they didn't know which direction Ardith had gone this time. So her relatives searched all over town. Their efforts were fruitless, and when it got dark, they went to the police. Due to the bad weather, the search was postponed until morning. The next day was no news about Ardith. One of the largest search operations in Ottawa's history began. It involved rescuers, police officers, dog handlers with their canines and helicopters. In total, about 1,000 people, including numerous volunteers. Ardith's family actively participated in the search, posting flyers with the girl's photo all around the city. But the first few days yielded no progress. The police turned to the public for help. Soon a call came from a local resident. She said that on the day of Ardith's disappearance, she was in the forest on the bike path and saw a creepy guy with a bicycle there. The witness described him as a young man with a pleasant appearance, well-dressed, but behaving extremely suspiciously. His conduct was frightening. It turned out the stranger had tried to push the girl off her bike and drag her into the bushes. Fortunately, other people appeared on the trail. The perpetrator fell behind and she managed to escape quickly. After this incident, she no longer felt safe on walks and stopped cycling alone. According to the girl, it happened in an area called Green Creek. She suggested that the stranger might have attacked Ardith as well. The eyewitness was invited to the police station to create a composite sketch. She described the suspect as a young man, 20-30 years old, light-skinned, dark-haired with a beard and glasses, pleasant-looking and athletically built. The sketch was shown to Ardith's family, but they didn't recognize anyone familiar to the missing woman. Many men wore similar glasses and beards at the time, so suspicion could fall on anyone. The investigators decided not to publish the portrait in the media, fearing a wave of false calls. The police constantly asked local residents for help, showing Ardith's photo. Law enforcement was confident. Such a bright, beautiful girl with a memorable appearance couldn't have gone unnoticed. Someone must have seen her and could provide a lead. This assumption proved true. 16-year-old Laura called the police. She said that on the day of the disappearance, while riding past on her bicycle, she saw Ardith on the bike trail. The missing woman was sitting on a rock, seemingly resting. When Laura rode further, she heard a scream. Turning around, the girl saw Ardith arguing with some guy. Laura didn't know what to think. Maybe it was just a lover's quarrel. Ardith wasn't calling for help. And then she went into the woods with that man. Laura wanted to find out what was happening, but got scared. Seeing the approaching storm, the 16-year-old witness hurried home. As she was leaving, she thought she heard someone screaming. The police invited Laura to the station to show her the composite sketch of the stranger. She recognized him. According to the girl, it all happened around 1 p.m. in the same place, Green Creek. Later, the police received several more calls from girls who had encountered this creepy guy on the trail. He attacked them, but the victims were lucky to escape. One woman's call particularly stood out. She recounted how an attractive stranger approached her during a walk. They had a pleasant conversation, but suddenly his behavior changed drastically. The men started grabbing her, but the woman managed to push the attacker away with her bicycle and quickly flee. She didn't even look back, afraid he would catch up. After returning home, the woman told her family about the incident and warned her loved ones to stay away from that place. Oddly, none of the girls who were attacked reported it to the police. The search for Ardith concentrated around the creek area. Soon, her bicycle was found, indicating the police were on the right track. Meanwhile, the investigators received another call that became a breakthrough in the case. A man, without giving his name, reported an unpleasant incident in the forest. Terrible accident. Allegedly, he didn't want to harm our Defoteka life. Confused, he decided to get rid of the body. The stranger carried the girl across the creek, dug a small pit and buried her there, covering the grave with branches. Then he hung up. The police managed to trace the call. It was made from a phone booth 20 minutes away from Ottawa. Law enforcement rushed there, hoping to find witnesses or lift fingerprints or DNA from the receiver. But disappointment awaited them. Someone had thoroughly wiped the handset. Neither eyewitnesses nor surveillance cameras could be found. The search for Ardith continued in Green Creek. Dogs trained to detect the smell of corpses arrived at the scene. Soon, the worst fears of the family and the police were confirmed. With the help of the dogs, they managed to find the missing woman's grave, located between two trees in a quiet, picturesque spot. Coming closer, the detective saw the half-buried naked body of the girl. Likely, the criminal was startled by someone, which is why he buried the victim so sloppily. Criminologists started examining the crime scene, but unfortunately found no evidence. No fingerprints or DNA. The medical examiner confirmed it was Ardith Wood. She died a horrific, agonizing death that didn't resemble an accident at all. Contrary to what the stranger said in his conversation with the police, the cause of death was drowning. Algae were found in her lungs, so the girl was still alive when she ended up in the water. Despite the body being found naked, the medical examiners didn't find unequivocal signs of rape, although they didn't rule it out. The police believed the crime was sexually motivated. In their opinion, the stranger hunted girls in a deserted place for this purpose. Otherwise, what else could have driven him? The detectives needed to catch the criminal urgently to avoid new victims. They were convinced he had attacked several girls and had already killed one. How far could the maniac go? The police decided to publish a composite sketch of the suspect in the media, asking the public for help in identifying him. Investigators received about 4,000 calls with leads and began processing them, which took a lot of time. On September 10th, the police released important information about the suspect. It turned out that the girls who saw the stranger in the forest had noticed one detail. He had an eagle tattoo on his left shoulder. This was a crucial lead that could help track down the criminal. The media published a sketch of the tattoo, after which several calls came to the police. People reported acquaintances with bird tattoos on their faces, necks, or backs. However, this information led nowhere. In April 2004, while processing another batch of calls, investigators came across an important clue. A man claimed he knew the killer. The person lived in the area and was riding a bicycle in the Green Creek vicinity of the time of the crime. The detectives were interested in this information and invited the specified suspect for a conversation. When the guy entered the police station, the investigators were amazed. He matched the criminal's description both in appearance and age. During the conversation, the young man was noticeably nervous. He said he often rode his bike along that trail, not understanding what the issue was. When the police asked him to show his shoulder, an eagle tattoo was found there. It turned out that the man had previously had problems with the law. He became the prime suspect. The interrogation lasted 3 hours. The entire time, the suspect answered questions defiantly and aggressively. He said about himself, "I'm like a scorpion under a rock. You never know what I'm going to do." The guy had no alibi, but couldn't say what he was doing on the day of our death's disappearance. However, he denied involvement in the girl's murder. There was insufficient evidence against him, so the suspect was released, but placed under surveillance. A few weeks later, he was invited for questioning again. The detectives had gathered a lot of information about him and carefully prepared their questions. They also suggested the young man take a polygraph test. The suspect agreed and easily passed all the tests. The police couldn't believe it but had to let him go. Got all suspicions. The investigation had reached a dead end. The Ottawa police announced a $50,000 reward for any information that would help solve the case. It was the largest amount law enforcement had ever offered under similar circumstances. Soon, about 5,000 calls with leads came in which the police began to check. One portion of information mentioned the name Christopher Myers, which caught the investigators' attention. It turned out he had previous convictions for selling prohibited substances. Colleagues described 25-year-old Chris as a quiet, non-confrontational, and even inconspicuous guy who worked as a janitor. His face was remarkably similar to the composite sketch of the suspect. Moreover, he had the same beard. The police were delighted, thinking they had finally found the right man. But it turned out Christopher had an alibi for the day of our death's disappearance. The landlady of the apartment he was renting claimed that on August 6, 2003, the young man was at home in the morning and then went to work at a restaurant. This surprised the police because a year had already passed. How could the woman remember the details of that day so clearly? Another problem arose. Christopher didn't have an eagle tattoo on his shoulder. Although witnesses insisted they had seen this tattoo on him, maybe he had it removed. The detectives were convinced this was the person they needed and had to prove it. A few weeks later, another similar attack occurred. In the evening, a girl who closely resembled Ardith was walking alone across a bridge when she heard someone walking behind her. Turning around, she saw an attractive man on a bicycle. The girl had no intention of making acquaintances or talking and asked to be left alone. The man rode past her, and just as she sighed with relief, the stranger turned his bicycle around and rushed straight at her. There was no one around who could help. The attacker jumped off his bike and forcibly dragged the victim into the bushes. The girl screamed very loudly, which seemed to frighten the assailant. He fled. The victim went to the police. Other investigators took on this case. Everyone assumed it was an attempted robbery, and the detectives investigating our death's disappearance found out about the incident much later. In May, another attack occurred on a tall blonde woman similar to the missing person. The girl was returning late in the evening from a party when a stranger approached her and tried to strike up a conversation. She asked to be left alone. Then he started asking for help, claiming he was lost. The girl explained where he should go, and he left. She breathed a sigh of relief, but literally 10 minutes later, he attacked her from the bushes. The assailant furiously began strangling her, twisting her neck. At that moment, the girl thought it was the end, but she continued to resist, screaming, hitting him, biting. Her screams attracted the attention of the residents of the building, who came out to see what was happening. This frightened the criminal and he fled, but this time he made a serious mistake. In his haste, he dropped his phone. Investigators established that the mobile belonged to Christopher Myers, whom they suspected in the odd death murder case. The puzzle came together. Chris committed all the similar crimes. He chose girls with similar appearances, blondes, and attacked them. Christopher was brought in for questioning, but he wasn't in a hurry to confess to the murder. He said he had never been to Green Creek, had never seen our death, and wasn't involved in the other attacks. Chris complained about mental health issues and uncontrollable aggression, but insisted he hadn't caused physical harm to anyone. The detectives noticed he had crooked teeth and persuaded him to take a polygraph test. The test lasted 5 hours, and Chris failed it miserably. But despite this, he still continued to claim his innocence, saying the polygraph was wrong. Since the results of the lie detector test weren't considered evidence, the suspect had to be released. For the next 5 months, detectives gathered evidence against him, interrogating everyone who knew Christopher, relatives, friends, colleagues, and his ex-girlfriend. It turned out Christopher was born into a dysfunctional family of alcoholics. His difficult childhood was accompanied by the development of various mental disorders, attention deficit disorder and schizoid disorder. Chris was taken from his birth family and adopted by another couple. The adoptive parents treated the boy with love, but he was uncontrollable. They couldn't cope with raising the troubled child and returned him to the orphanage when Chris turned 12. As he grew older, he seemed to become an ordinary, normal guy. Christopher graduated from school, entered university, socialized with friends, and lived in a dormitory. But his roommate considered Chris abnormal. He told creepy stories that frightened her. Eventually, she kicked him out of the room. Chris's ex-girlfriend revealed that he loved cycling along the trails of Ottawa and was fascinated by the picturesque scenery. She also disclosed his main secret. Christopher enjoyed temporary tattoos. For a while, he had the exact image of an eagle on his shoulder. The girl was shown a sketch of the tattoo, and she confirmed that he had the same one on his left shoulder. Christopher was summoned for questioning on October 13, 2005. He was placed in a very cramped interrogation room. This time, the conversation was conducted by burly men who pushed their chairs right up against Chris. All this put tremendous psychological pressure on the suspect. The investigators started with simple words. "We know everything about you, Chris. We know it was you who killed our death." Christopher responded evasively. 3 hours later, he began to give testimony. Confused and inconsistent, Chris admitted that he was in Green Creek that day and met our death. Struck by her beauty, he decided to get acquainted. He started giving compliments, chatting nicely, and then invited the girl into the woods, and she agreed. Once there, Christopher began hugging and kissing her, showing the detectives exactly how. And then, according to him, it all ended. Ardith recoiled from him. Apparently, she didn't like his manners. She ran away but fell into the creek. Christopher tried to save the girl but failed. He wanted to portray himself as a hero, but this absolutely didn't correspond to his subsequent actions. For some reason, he pulled Ardith's body out of the water, undressed it, and buried it. When the policeman stated that Chris was going to be charged with murder, he immediately retracted his words. "No, I never met her. It was a joke. I took all the information from the newspapers." The detective had to have a serious one-on-one conversation with him. Eventually, Chris confessed to killing Ardith. He even drew a map with the trails in Green Creek where he met the girl. On it, he marked another person, Laura, who saw him with the victim in the forest. Laura recognized the suspect as the same man she had seen then. Christopher was arrested on October 20th, 2005. He agreed to go to the crime scene to recreate the events. But when they arrived at the indicated trail, Christopher suddenly declared that it wasn't the right location, claiming everything happened elsewhere, although everything matched. Christopher had an unstable psyche. He would give testimony and then retract his words. Later, he also confessed to other attacks on girls. He was charged with additional crimes for these offenses. At the trial, the lawyer stated that Christopher was just a troubled young man. At first, the accused denied his previous confessions. But later, on the advice of his defense attorney, he decided to make a deal with the investigation and plead guilty. On January 8, 2008, 5 years after the murder, the defendant confessed to the crime but refused to disclose the motives and details. Later, he also admitted to the other attacks. The prosecution believed that on that day, Chris wasn't on the forest trail by chance. He was stalking his prey like a hunter. He attacked several girls who were lucky enough to escape. The likely motive was sexual assault. Ardith was unlucky that day. She was Christopher's type, an attractive blonde. He tried to get acquainted with her, but something went wrong and an argument broke out between them, which was overheard by a teenage girl riding by. Under some pretext, the killer managed to lure Ardith into the woods. There, he attacked her, started undressing her, intending to rape her. To save herself, the girl ran away and jumped into the creek. Chris rushed after her, caught up, and drowned her, then buried the body. The victim's parents agreed with the prosecution's version. According to them, Ardith was a good swimmer and couldn't have drowned in the creek. In their opinion, the defendant deliberately drowned the girl. However, it remained a mystery to them how Christopher managed to convince Ardith to go into the woods with him. As part of the deal with the investigation, Christopher pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a right to parole only after 10 years. In 2020, he filed a relevant petition, but the commission rejected it, recognizing the high risk of repeated crimes against women. In 2007, A plaque in memory of our death was installed on one of the centuries-old oaks in Green Creek Park. And in 2017, during a powerful thunderstorm, just like on the day of a murder, lightning struck the same tree. The oak suffered serious damage, and experts didn't believe it would survive. But a miracle happened. The mighty tree withstood. It still grows as a living monument to the girl who was killed nearby. Mauricio Leal was born on November 25, 1973 in Cartago, Valdelcalca, Colombia. From a young age, Mauricio was captivated by the world of beauty. As a child, he could spend hours mesmerized by the salons he passed by, although he didn't fully understand that this fascination would become a lifelong passion. His interest in beauty began to take shape when his mother, Marlene Hernandez, a woman who enjoyed learning new skills, decided to take a hairdressing course. Mauricio, around 10 or 11 years old at the time, begged his mother to let him attend with her. Although she initially told him he couldn't go because he wasn't enrolled, he didn't give up. Instead, he would watch her learn from outside the classroom, captivated by the artistry. Mauricio's early years, however, weren't easy. His parents often argued, creating a tense home environment. Influenced by this, some of his siblings got into trouble, though Mauricio managed to stay focused. At just 15, he urged his parents to consider separating, believing that constant conflict wasn't beneficial for anyone. When his father heard that Mauricio had suggested the separation, he taunted him, questioning who would take care of his mother and siblings. Mauricio didn't respond with words. He resolved to show through his actions that responsibility and resilience were not defined by anyone's expectations. Determined to support his family, Mauricio left Cartago and moved to Cali. He found a modest room and took on various jobs, from packing goods to delivering food on his bicycle, all while continuing his studies, often sleeping only 4 hours a night. Despite these challenges, Mauricio maintained a positive outlook. One day, in a conversation with a woman at his aunt's church, he shared his passion for hairdressing but explained that financial responsibilities kept him from pursuing it fully. By a stroke of luck, the woman knew someone who owned a salon and offered to introduce Mauricio. At just 16, Mauricio began working at the salon. Without experience, he started with basic tasks, sweeping, cleaning, serving coffee, and running errands. After some time, he gathered the courage to tell the salon owner he knew how to cut hair, a claim he wasn't entirely confident about. The owner challenged him to prove it by cutting his own hair. In that moment, Mauricio, though inexperienced, showed his natural talent, impressing the owner and securing a role as a stylist. Mauricio's popularity grew rapidly. Some clients were initially skeptical, seeing him in his school uniform, but word of his skills quickly spread. Within just 7 months, Mauricio became the most sought-after stylist in the salon, allowing him to provide a better life for his mother and siblings. His older brother, Joni, often heard their mother express pride in Mauricio's hard work. By 1995, at 22, Mauricio was well regarded in Cali, known not only for his haircuts, but also for his high-level makeup skills. Long waits to see him became common. Tired of not receiving the credit and pay he deserved, he decided to open his own salon, naming it Mauricio Leal. Though he faced challenges with expenses, starting with just a plastic chair and a borrowed mirror, clients filled his new salon within a weekend. Soon the demand became so high that Mauricio had to hire his first employee, his brother, Joni. He taught Joni the skills and hard work required in the trade, marking the beginning of Mauricio's career as both a stylist and a business owner, all while building a legacy that would carry his name forward in the beauty industry. Within just a month of opening, Mauricio Leal's salon saw a rapid expansion. One of the salons where Mauricio had previously worked went out of business after he left, as his departure caused a sharp drop in clientele. As a result, former employees from that salon, along with others from different salons, began asking Mauricio for work. In a matter of months, his team grew to 35 employees. His salon was now equipped with high-end tools, and Mauricio, along with his family, enjoyed a level of prosperity they once thought unreachable. Yet Mauricio's ambition continued to drive him. Feeling that Cali was becoming too small for his aspirations, he packed his belongings and headed to Bogota, Colombia's economic powerhouse, determined to establish himself as one of the country's top stylists. In Bogota, Mauricio humbly started by working in a friend's salon, and he quickly gained recognition. Several of his former clients from Cali, now professional models and TV presenters, chose him over other stylists in the capital. Within 3 months, Mauricio opened his second salon, this time in one of Bogota's prime areas, further solidifying his growing reputation. Despite his fame and success, Mauricio never forgot his roots or his family. His mother, Marlene, was his pride and joy, and he treated her to a lifestyle of luxury, complete with vacations, yacht trips, and champagne toasts. However, Mauricio's success cast a contrasting shadow over his siblings. His half-brother, Carlos Andres, sadly, was serving a sentence in a maximum security prison for a serious crime. Meanwhile, his older brother, Yoni, had also opened a salon, thanks to Mauricio's guidance. Although Yoni managed to establish his business, he never achieved the same level of success as Mauricio, leading to resentment. In the midst of facing his own difficulties, including a divorce, Yoni asked to move in with Mauricio. Mauricio, ever generous, agreed. Despite the demanding nature of his work, caused him severe thoracic and back pain, Mauricio managed his condition with pain relief medication, even resorting to morphine when the pain became unbearable. Over the years, he learned to live with it, but a tragic event would soon overshadow any efforts at improvement. On Monday, November 22, 2021, Mauricio's career was at its peak. That morning, he was scheduled for an important meeting with representatives from the Miss Universe pageant, where he was set to negotiate a contract that would place him on an international stage. However, when the representatives arrived at his salon, Mauricio was nowhere to be found. Concerned, Karen, who was the daughter of Mauricio's trusted driver, Jose Jair Ruiz, reached out to her father, Jair, who was like a brother to Mauricio, shared that Mauricio had messaged him that morning, saying he wanted to sleep a bit longer. By 2 p.m., the absence became alarming. Karen's calls to both Mauricio and his mother went unanswered, and each attempt seemed to be met with someone hanging up. Growing increasingly worried, Jair contacted Yoni, who was living with Mauricio at the time, to ask if he had any information. Together, they went to Mauricio's residence in La Calera, a luxurious residential complex. Familiar to the security guards, they entered without issue. Upon entering, they found the home in a seemingly normal state, no signs of violence or theft. However, an ominous feeling overcame Jair when he tried to open the master bedroom door, which was locked. When he received no response, he climbed outside to a window overlooking the garden. To his surprise, the window wasn't locked, and upon entering, he was met with a devastating sight. Blood covered the scene, with Mauricio lying lifeless on the bed, a knife still embedded in his body. Beside him was the body of his mother, Marlene, in an equally tragic state. Jonier rushed in after hearing Jair's screams. Shocked and horrified, he knew immediately that his brother and mother were gone. Fighting the impulse to approach the bodies, Jonier urged Jerry to step back to avoid contaminating the initial speculation pointed to a murder-suicide, especially when police found a note signed by Mauricio reading, "I love you. Forgive me. I can't take it anymore." Although the letter seemed genuine, the scene itself suggested otherwise. Mauricio's body was positioned with a knife in his abdomen, still held by his hands, alongside several pills on the nightstand, which at first glance appeared to support the theory of a suicide. However, a closer inspection by investigators led to a different conclusion. This was not a case of suicide, rather a carefully staged double homicide. Mauricio's body bore 4 deep stab wounds to the abdomen, each with significant force, which immediately aroused suspicion. Typically, someone attempting to end their own life would seek a quick and less painful method. Analyzing the wounds, experts suggested it would be nearly impossible for Mauricio to inflict such deep injuries on himself repeatedly. The idea of someone inflicting a fatal wound, pulling out the knife, and repeating this multiple times seemed highly unlikely, especially given the considerable strength required. Additionally, Mauricio was right-handed, making it improbable that he could deliver such force consistently to that part of his body. Adding to the suspicion were the numerous bruises on Mauricio's forearms, indicative of a struggle, as though he had tried to fend off an assailant. Speculation soon arose regarding a potential motive, including theories about criminal connections. Some believed that Mauricio's business success and income sources might have attracted the attention of criminal organizations, given his prior involvement in a scandal when he was linked to the Clinton list, a blacklist for those suspected of laundering drug-related money. Years before, Mauricio had partnered with a wealthy client to open a salon in Miami, which later failed. The client was later revealed to be associated with the family of a notorious cartel leader. Consequently, authorities temporarily froze Mauricio's assets and accounts. Although he eventually recovered, This past incident fueled theories about his death potentially being a targeted attack. However, doubts emerged regarding this theory. If a criminal organization had been involved, it seemed unlikely that they would leave no trace of forced entry in Mauricio's heavily guarded residence or resort to using a knife instead of a firearm. The brutal nature of the wounds, particularly those inflicted on his mother Marlene, suggested personal anger, as the injuries were far too severe to be random or impersonal. The case soon gained media attention, with television programs exploring Mauricio's life and interviewing those who knew him, including his loyal driver, Jair Ruiz. Jair, visibly shaken in interviews, had discovered the bodies and faced intense scrutiny from Mauricio's older brother, Joni. Joni, in contrast, exhibited a puzzling demeanor following his brother's death. In interviews, he expressed a sense of duty to carry on Mauricio's legacy, remarking that, "There's no use in being sad. Mauricio would want us to continue." Yet his statements and actions raised suspicions as he appeared to claim Mauricio's accomplishments and possessions as his own, even wearing his brother's white jacket in multiple public appearances. In one interview, Jonier inadvertently referred to Jair as "my driver," catching himself with an awkward correction to clarify Jair had actually been his brother's driver. As time went on, public opinion diverged. Some saw Joni as innocent while others believed his calculated statements were rehearsed. The police were initially criticized for their perceived slowness. But on January 15, 2022, Joni was arrested in Bogota on charges of double homicide. He was carrying a large sum of cash at the time, suggesting he might have planned to flee or use his newfound inheritance for a lavish lifestyle. The arrest stunned the nation, but even more shocking was Jonier's eventual confession at the Attorney General's office. In court, Jonier delivered a carefully worded statement. "I have made a very personal and important decision freely and voluntarily to accept the charges through an agreement with the prosecutor's office. I extend my sincerest apologies to my family, my children, the victims, and all of Colombia for these events." His admission, however, was laden with euphemisms, referring to Mauricio and Marlene only as the victims and distancing himself from any emotional connection. For many, Jonier's lack of empathy explained why he had never achieved Mauricio's level of success. Unlike his brother, he lacked Mauricio's humanity and kindness. The confession seemed to conclude the case, but a sudden twist reopened the investigation. Under Colombian law, a guilty verdict does not guarantee a severe sentence, with potential outcomes ranging from a life sentence to a mere year in prison or even a fine. In Jonier's case, his initial trial declared him innocent, only for a subsequent trial to find him guilty. As the legal process unfolded, the public awaited the final sentence, knowing that in Colombia, the outcome could mean either justice served or an unexpected release. On April 22, 2022, in a courtroom appearance, Joni made a surprising statement. "Today I feel clearer and more aware. With this newfound clarity, I can firmly say I acted under pressure, and yesterday I made the decision, which I shared with my family, to renounce this prejudice. I've said it before and will say it again, freely and sincerely. I am innocent. My life has been dedicated to serving my family, my children, and society." Jonier had claimed innocence from the beginning, even after receiving threats against himself and other family members. Interestingly, Jair, Mauricio's driver, also faced backlash, despite the fact that he had neither been present at the residence when the murders occurred nor possessed a key to the home, both conditions that applied to Jonier. The pieces of the case began to come together as more detail surfaced. For months before the murders, Jonier had moved in with Mauricio, who had always lived with their mother. Many believed that Jonier had already planned the tragic events long before moving in. By this time, Jonier was nearly 50, facing mounting debts from his struggling salon business and feeling increasingly isolated from his own family. His life, he realized, was on a downward spiral, while Mauricio's success and prominence only continued to grow. From this twisted perspective, Jonier saw himself in Mauricio's shadow, resentful of his younger brother's success and apparent favoritism within the family. Though Mauricio was generous with him, even asking for small favors with a cautious tone, likely knowing Jonier's volatile temperament, the relationship remained strained. The evening before the murders, Jonier attended a family gathering, later making a point to emphasize that he had been out and that Mauricio and their mother had not left their rooms. Security records later confirmed his movements in and out of the complex. Around 9 p.m. while Jonier was out, Mauricio sent what would be his final voice message to his brother. The message was simple, asking Jonier to pick up some cookies, but Mauricio's tone seemed unusually cautious, as if aware of his brother's temper. At 11 p.m., Yoni returned to the mansion and claimed he left the cookies on a table without speaking to his family before heading to bed. Throughout his statements, Yoni maintained a detached attitude, repeatedly suggesting that the murders happened while he was asleep. When confronted with evidence that the murders likely took place in the early morning, he claimed he'd taken valerian drops for a deep sleep and left for work the next morning without seeing anyone. Given the mansion's high security, it would have been nearly impossible for an outsider to enter without Jaire's help. Mauricio often shared that he was close to his mother and trusted friends, but if a family member displayed questionable behavior, he had no problem distancing himself. Tensions with Jonier had escalated over money, with Mauricio's refusal to lend him more reinforcing that Jonier had no direct claim to his wealth. After the murders, police noted several oddities in Jonier's behavior. Around 11 a.m., he was captured on security footage leaving the mansion, and shortly after, sending a voice message to Marlene's phone. A bizarre move that many saw as either a mocking gesture or a twisted attempt at covering his tracks. He even sent out goodbye messages to Mauricio's contacts, pretending to be his brother. A revelation that further unsettled investigators. Security footage from the residential complex confirmed that Yoni was in the mansion from 11 p.m. until 11 a.m. the following day, which coincides with the estimated time frame of the murders. A neighbor reported hearing Marlene shout that night, "Yoni, enough, I'm tired of this." To which Yoni allegedly responded, "Mom, always with the same thing." It's believed that shortly after this confrontation, Yoni attacked his mother first. The fact that the murders were committed with kitchen knives from the home further suggested that the culprit was someone who lived there. Highly unlikely to be a hitman, as professionals don't typically arrive unarmed and rely on improvised weapons. Curiously, Marlene sustained far more injuries than Mauricio, particularly in her abdomen, leading some to speculate that Jonier harbored deep resentment toward his mother. These wounds were possibly symbolic, a way for him to express anger over being brought into a world where he felt unloved. Despite planning the attack meticulously, Jonier's choice of a knife suggested a desire to carry out his revenge personally, wanting to feel every moment of control and anger firsthand. An analysis of Mauricio's body revealed high levels of clonazepam in his system, a sedative that can cause drowsiness and confusion, raising the possibility that Jonier had administered a significant dose to incapacitate him. Though Mauricio didn't reach a comatose state, the drug likely left him severely disoriented. Additionally, investigators discovered a pre-written suicide note suggesting that Yoni had intended to frame Mauricio from the start. Yoni reportedly forced Mauricio to sign the note, which was left at the crime scene. After committing the murders, Yoni, using gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, staged the scene to make it appear as a suicide. The housekeeper, upon arrival to help with the investigation, noticed that cleaning supplies were not in their usual place, and there were traces of blood on the stairs, suggesting that Yoni hadn't managed a thorough cleanup. At 11 a.m., Yoni was captured on camera leaving the mansion. Mauricio's driver, Jair, received an unusual message that morning, purportedly from Mauricio, instructing him not to send the housekeeper because he wanted to sleep. The message seemed suspicious because Mauricio habitually ended messages with "baby," especially with trusted friends like Jair. Additionally, several of Mauricio's contacts received voice messages that sounded like a farewell. Investigators later confirmed these recordings were actually made by Yoni impersonating his brother. The final question remained, how long would Jonier face in prison? Officially, he could be sentenced to up to 50 years, though experts believed he might receive closer to 30, with some speculating a potential reduction to 15 years due to his claims of coercion. Further leniency could come from good behavior, potentially cutting his sentence even shorter. Despite common delays in such cases, Jonier's lawyer faced criticism for excessive stalling, even receiving threats for the audacious postponements. Throughout this process, Jonier showed little remorse. Many speculated that his only regret was not executing the plan more effectively to avoid capture. His resentment toward Mauricio stemmed from feeling overshadowed, as he had often relied on the reputation of being Mauricio Leal's brother to attract clients, yet struggled with debts as his own salon never thrived. After Mauricio's death, the question arose, what would happen to his estate? His assets, valued at over $1 million, officially passed to his half-brother, Carlos Andres Garcia, who remains in prison with a release date estimated around 2030. Without a direct heir capable of managing his business empire, Mauricio's salons were closed. The case has captivated the nation, sparking countless theories and speculation. With each new revelation from lawyer Elmer Montaña, the complexity and murkiness of unraveling the truth become ever clearer. A recently uncovered video found on Mauricio Leal's phone has sent shockwaves across the country. In the clip, Mauricio appears distressed, seemingly forced to take the blame for his mother's murder as her lifeless body lies beside him. This shocking evidence surfaced long after the crime, which originally took place in November 2021, shedding new light on a story that only seems to grow darker as more details emerge.